Folks, welcome to Napa Valley, California, and my oral history of the origins of winemaking in Napa Valley continue today with the head winemaker at Biale Vineyards, Goetting. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you. Top of the morning. Top of the morning, everybody.
Nothing better than a glass of wine in the top.
This is how we do it. This is how we do it. This is how we wake up here.
I wanted to ask you just to talk to younger wine growers, people that might be interested. I mean, was there a time in your career when you actually ever contemplated walking away?
Oh yeah, several times. In fact, just last year might have been one of those times. But it's a very challenging, profession. Mother Nature is in charge, and it's very humbling, and you have to remember that. And you go through your trials and tribulations, and your foibles and fails, and it's very humbling. And so it's also very rewarding. And so when you put it on a scale and you go like this, and you're drinking wine that you made with your family and friends on the holidays or whenever, or you're at an event, rubbing elbows and schmoozing with fancy pants people and eating great food and drinking great wine and having the time of your life, it all outweighs all the difficulties of it all. It's really very rewarding, but it's definitely challenging.
Now, can you talk about like one of your early on, before you ever even maybe came to Napa? Can you just talk about early on how to get your chops, how to get your feet wet early on?
Yeah, good. Well, first of all, I've always been in Napa. I'm from here.
Oh, you are? Okay, you are.
Life. Yeah, so I'm one of the rare case studies where I'm actually from here. Winemaker from Napa is getting more and more rare. We have a lot of transplants. So I think getting my feet wet here was, I'm a product of my environment, and that's kind of how I got my feet wet. My mother was in the industry. She was in the wine business, on the hospitality side of things, and she loved it. I mean, I could see the joy and the passion she had.
Did she like the class? I don't want to say classism, but did she like the social part of it, or did she love the wine part of it?
She loved the social part of it. Yeah, good question. But back then, we're talking about in the 70s,
sure,
right?
Sure.
And so back then, there wasn't a high class part of Napa Valley, really. It was just a bunch of farmers, and there was only a handful of wineries here. It wasn't like it is now, and it's really changed quite a bit. And so she really just loved the social. Don't get me wrong, she loved her wine, but no, she loved the social aspect.
Right? Could you, for the audience, as a young boy, talk about that culture of the farmers in the 70s, and then juxtapose it to today?
Yeah, so growing up in the 70s here in Napa Valley, and in Napa specifically, it was just a kind of a blue collar town. It was a bunch of all my buddies had friends whose fathers were farmers. They had vineyards, and they drove old beat up trucks, and they didn't even know that they were land wealthy. They didn't know the value of the land then like we do now.
Did they care? I mean,
no.
they didn't care.
No, they didn't care.
They made their money.
They were making a living.
They were making a living,
and that's
on the land.
And that's what we still want to do today, right? So it's just different how we know the value of the land now as the population has grown and we're running out of places to plant, right? So the concept is still the same. And the morals and the ethics are there, and what we want to do is still the same. It's just changed because people are coming in from other areas with a lot of money, and that changes things quickly. But it was not like that. Absolutely not.
Can you talk about an inspirational time early on in your life when the money didn't matter, when it was a communal thing and it really got you energized to get into the whole field?
Sure. My very first wine job, I was 16 years old. I started working in the wine cellar at Tulake Winery with Bill Cabman, old school Chardonnay producer.
Is that cat still around?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
yeah. Bill Cabman's still kicking it, making great wine. over in Coombsville. But my mother was friends with him, and he had a cellar rat position open, and needed somebody to lug hoses around and clean drains and climb into tanks and organize things, and I was stoked. I mean, my buddies were all working at McDonald's, and
How old were you?
I was 16.
Yeah. So explain what a cellar rat job is. Lord knows I might be bucking for one of those pretty soon.
I got a pair of boots.
So I mean, what is a cellar rat?
A cellar rat is a very labor-intensive job. It's all the stuff that nobody wants to do, right? It's getting on your hands and knees and unclogging the drain, and it's scrubbing bins, and it's getting inside of tanks, and it's a lot of cleaning. And a lot of lifting and pulling, and it's very physical work. It's all the stuff that you need to know how to do to ultimately get to be a winemaker. And so I did that whole route. I started as a cellar rat and worked my way up the hard way. And
so let's take it incrementally. You went from a cellar rat, but then you had a taste for wine. You realized
Yeah.
When did you begin to cross over to the more scientific side of things?
Yeah, probably a good point, because at 16 years old, it's just a job. I mean, I loved it. I loved the smells, and I wasn't drinking the wine. I wasn't into the wine. I just loved the environment.
Right.
And I loved the work. But yeah, I didn't really start, I didn't get bit by the wine bug per se until I was out of college. But I did work in several aspects of the wine business leading up to going off to school, in tasting rooms, in hospitality, event serving, other wine cellar rat jobs as well. But it wasn't until I got back from school, from university, that I got another job in the cellar and had a great teacher, a great mentor. And that's
Who was that?
Well, the first one was Dennis Johns. Dennis Johns was at St. Clement. He was the winemaker there for over 20 years, I think. St. Clement's a little Cabernet producer up in St. Helena.
Still in Napa Valley?
Yep, still going at it.
I'm curious, this is important. What were the salient parts of that you picked up on from him, the nuance parts of him?
He taught me how to taste, how to describe wine, what you're smelling, what you're tasting.
Yeah, that's it. That would be fascinating.
Yeah,
that is something I'm still searching for. But you can tell. So break that down.
Yeah, so we would be working on a lot of wine, or a certain wine in particular. We'd be taking it out of barrels into the tank, and he would teach me to stop and pull a sample, taste it, smell it. What are you getting? Is there anything off here? Is there anything really pretty? If so, what is that? Is it dark fruit? Is it bright fruit? Is it deep? Is it acidic? Kind of start trying to explain these things. And there's no right or wrong. It's just go for it. What are you feeling here when you taste this wine? And that's a huge lesson. That really starts it all, because when you can let go of the fear of being wrong about talking about wine,
right,
you got it made. Because a lot of people, they're scared to be wrong, and there's no wrong. It's what
are they scared because they're going to lose a sales deal? Why would they be? I mean, just becoming.
No, I think more socially. I think that they're
interesting.
intimidated by people who know more than them about wine, and they don't want to feel like they're amateurs. You have to impress people, they think, and a lot of that happens. It's not necessarily in sales, just more on a social.
Would you say that there's peer pressure in wine culture?
There can be, absolutely. It's with winemakers, it's very it's friendly competition. We're all very friendly and helpful. I can call any of my buddies in this valley when I'm having a problem and say, "Hey man, I've got this stuck for men, or I've got this going on. What have you seen that works? Are you seeing this too?" And we share information, but we also are competitive. We want to be better than each other, and so it's kind of a neat thing in that way. Yeah.
Talking to Tress Goetting here on the Jake Feinberg Show, live on Power Talk. Keep the comments coming in. Can you talk about how you met Robert Biale?
Yeah, actually, a really funny story. I play in a band on the side.
We saw them last night.
Yeah,
Silverado pickups.
Very fun. Yeah, and so I had a gig here at the winery, and they had an event and they needed a band, and we got hired, and I came and played the event, and I was packing up afterwards, and we had a great time, and I was talking to one of the workers here, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're looking for a winemaker." And I was kind of on the outs at my last job and looking for a winemaking gig. And I said, no way, really? So I followed up with Bob. I said, hey, I wrote him an email. I said, hey, thanks for letting us play. We had a great time. Really appreciate it. By the way, I heard through the grapevine that you're looking for a winemaker, and attached is my resume. And sure enough, got a call back and got an interview. And then another interview, and another interview, and I think I went through about 5 or 6 interviews here. They were very serious about this position, rightly so. This is a serious winery, and I landed the job, and here I am.
It's awesome because the backstory is that they had 2 candidates already picked out.
Right.
Like it was already a done deal, and then all of a sudden Goetting comes into the picture.
I threw my name in the hat and threw a wrench in the thing and knocked him out, I guess.
What is the? I mean, I can't see it being just sitting and talking interviews. Were you showing them what your chops?
Yeah, absolutely. The first couple were meet and greet, get to know the vibe. Get to know us, get to know you. Typical, but then it got into the advanced interviews where it was like kind of like what a chef would have to do: cook for us, show us what you can do. So it was the same thing. So what they did is, I remember the one, I'll never forget it. It was very much like if you ever watched that show Top Chef, or those competitive ones where
my daughters love the show.
They basically put me in the lab with a bunch of wines laid out unmarked. They said, taste through these, write down what they are. Tell us what you think they are, then make a blend of what you think the best percentages of each would make the best wine. And you got 30 minutes, and they closed the door. And
wow,
off I went.
Had you ever had that before?
Not like that. That was pretty.
Was it your first winemaking gig, or were you coming from another?
No, I had been before Biale. I was making wines up at Stagecoach Vineyard for the Krupp Brothers label.
So you weren't just not John Kruk.
No.
Yeah.
It was time for a change. It was a time in my life. My wife was pregnant with our child, and we had just bought a house, and it was just time. And I started looking, and it just almost.
Do you remember what you blended up that day? Do you remember what you did?
Well, I know it was a Zinfandel, but
15 different kinds, right?
I can't remember, but it was there was some obvious winners and some obvious losers in there, and I kicked out the ones, and I obviously must have impressed them or did something right because they called me back. So
with the wine, take us through what you're drinking right now.
Yeah, right.
And then show the people how to become a little bit more cultured in their understanding of wine.
Yeah. So what I'm drinking right now is our 2016 Black Chicken, and the Black Chicken is our flagship Zinfandel. It's a Zinfandel that mostly comes from the estate right behind us here, as well as the other original Biale property right down the street where Bob grew up. And it's a very friendly, approachable Zinfandel. It's got our style written all over it. That's why we call it our flagship wine. It's the wine that we make the most of, and it's the wine that most people know. And it's got the classic Robert Biale elegance. So that's kind of what we do here. We're a Zinfandel house. We specialize in old vine heritage vineyards and specialize mostly in Zinfandel and Petit Syrah.
Just to be clear, old vines means you didn't rip up the ground when the industry was telling you to go in a different direction. Is that? Can you break down old vine versus new vine?
Well, the official age for old vine, they say, the Historical Vineyard Society has stated that means that it's 50 years old or older. Some of the vineyards that we work with are upwards of 130 years old, so planted in the late 1880s, which is amazing.
Still functioning.
Absolutely, making beautiful.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, isn't that?
It's well over 100 years old.
Right. Yeah. So that's what we specialize in here, and it makes for some pretty special wine making and wines themselves. Yeah.
I heard when I was talking to Jay Hemingway yesterday, he used the same word to describe Rob Biale. There's an eloquence to not just the taste of the wine, but just how he runs his shop. Can you try to define that for the audience, especially for younger cats who might be sitting on some dough, and we know that there's a lot more people coming from out of town.
Right.
What is that eloquence that is essential, especially in this time of greed?
Yeah, so you get that by, well, it all starts in the field, right? So we farm to produce fruit that will allow me to make the wines in an elegant fashion.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so what that means is, Bob and I are out in the vineyard from the growing season, which is essentially now. We just got into bud break right now. So pretty soon here, we're going to be out in the field and going and checking all of our vineyards to make sure all the way through the growing process, through ripening and into harvest, the protocols and the procedures are done to our specs, meaning amendments are done in a timely fashion to the soil, leafing, dropping fruit, making sure there's no pests or mildew, and just checking on things and making sure the vines are in balance with their crop load and all of these things. Crop load is very important for establishing the flavor and the style of the wine. So to get this elegant style, we're putting the vine into balance. The fruit is very concentrated. It's not overcropped, which would dilute flavors.
Sure.
It's at a load that can maximize flavor and ripeness. And so if I get that kind of fruit coming into the winery, I'm already to second base, right? So then I've just got to keep it clean and get it through fermentation and babysit it and get it home.
I want to know what your genius is. I mean, like as you saw in full display last night, I'm able to extract stories from people that they've either never told before, haven't thought about since they actually occurred. What is Tress's genius as it relates to the wine cultivation process? And you can go all the way and say everything, but what?
No.
But what's I'm not your favorite thing. What's the thing you're best at?
Good question. I think finesse. We call it the Tress finesse.
Let's go deeper. The Tress finesse.
Yes.
I love that. Go deeper on that.
My old winemaker mentor, Aaron Pott, called it the Tress finesse. And I think that light, those kid gloves, handling the fruit gently, especially for wines like this that we're trying to make with elegance, you have to handle them with finesse. And that means processing without pumping, using gravity, a lot of old school methods. Very gentle handling, almost like you would make a Pinot Noir, right?
Right.
So using gravity, doing punch downs rather than pump overs, not breaking up the seeds and extracting too much tannin. Really paying attention to temperature and not over extracting tannin, really. So cooler temperatures, longer, slower ferments. Because you think about, this fermenter is actually a boiling pot of stew, right? You get that too hot, and you're going to cook off a lot of those beautiful flavors.
That's right.
Onions, and it's the same with fruit. So nice and cool, nice and slow. Let those flavors kind of meld in there, and be very gentle. And then, of course, press gently. Use the proper yeast strains. You've got barrels that you need to be very careful with. You don't want to overpower this beautiful fruit with too much oak. It's like over-salting the stew. All of those things. So it's very analogous to cooking, right? And music, and lots of things in life.
Right, it's a gumbo. I mean,
right.
Music is a meal.
Right.
How do you deal with quantity at the level that you're dealing with to make sure that it's spot on?
Have your nose in it. Be tasting.
Get your nose in it.
Get your hands dirty and be out there and get in it.
I was going to say, if there's a danger to the wine industry or the etiquette of the wine industry, is it a rush to produce mass quantities at the risk of making it kind of a homogeneous kind of situation where you lose those essential flavors because you're rushing to mass produce it, right? I mean, you guys maybe take more time than other peeps because of what you're doing with the old school methods.
Yes, and that's a good point, because that does happen, and it's been happening for a long time. But
it has been happening for a long time.
Okay. But the difference here, and with a lot of the really high-end small producers, is that that's what we are. There's different tiers. So you're always going to have the mass-produced, hurry, go, 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 behind the curtain, dun, 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 dun. But we also
in and out.
Right. We're also always going to have these family-owned, handcrafted, high-end artisanal wines, and so it just depends on what tier you're on. In a place like this, we don't have to worry about that. We have our goal. We know what we are. We have our identity, and we're sticking to that plan.
How? Talk a little bit about the culture of wine today in your mind. I mean, do you get your vegetables from? Who do you get your vegetables from?
Yeah.
And your fruit from?
Right. Yeah. We source from a very select handful of growers. These are people that we seek out for the most part.
Now, how do you determine who you wind up collaborating?
Well, for us, it's pretty easy because we're trying to find old vineyards. We love to make wine from old vineyards, so we go out, and Bob and I, and drive around, and
wow,
look.
This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
You're driving to find soil.
Exactly, and we know what soil tastes like because of experience. We've made wine from these different areas throughout our lives, and we know. So if we have a certain spice we're looking for, a certain category of zinfandel that we want to achieve, for instance, something on the brighter red fruit style, then we're going to go to that area of the valley that we know that type of fruit grows, and we're going to start seeking those out. And old vineyards stand out. It's pretty obvious. And so we pretty much know who either owns or who's sourcing fruit from these vineyards. And if we don't, we go and knock on the door and find out. And sometimes that leads to us getting some fruit. It really has. Bob's gone up and asked people who's getting your fruit, and it's led to long-term contracts. So
I just want to be clear. There's still a lot of people that. I mean, is there a land shortage for wine growing out here, or you're still finding plots of land to at least? It's kind of a double-edged question. It's like I realize that there's a shortage of space to grow, but yet you're still going out on the prowl to find soil.
Absolutely.
Okay, so break that. How much availability is out here?
It's less and less, and it's getting harder and harder to plant because you have to get plantings approved through the county. And the county.
And that wasn't always the way it was.
Well, it's always been that way, but it's just gotten more and more difficult as land has been consumed and planted, and less is available. And people have broken rules for erosion control and clearing trees and creek and watershed issues, and so they're really tight now, which is a good thing. And we're doing our job. We're sustainable farmers. We're green, certified green here in the vineyard as well as in the winery, and that's our MO. That's our gig, and we look for growers that have the same mindset. So that's how we find the ones that we want to work.
Is there parts of Napa that have still not been culled by you and Biale driving around? I mean, is it kind of an endless thing?
There's plenty left, but it's knowing what to look for.
Exactly, it's not all going to hit the
raw
whole
land, because you have to know your slope. There's a certain percentage. You have to know if there's a creek nearby, or are there trees. Is there all these things? So you see a piece of land that is pretty obvious that you're not going to be able to plant it. We don't bother. You see a piece that looks like it could be passable through the procedure and the process, then we inquire about it. But we also look for vineyards that are already established. That's even better. We approach the farmer and ask if we can buy their fruit, and we contract the fruit. So a lot of our vineyards are that way as well.
Did you? I mean, you are the winemaker. Who would be considered the grower here? I only asked that because Bob was telling me before in the old days, the grower would just call the winery and say, the grapes are ready, can we bring them over? And the winery would say, sure, let's but the trust would be with the grower.
The trust.
So and he said that's kind of now with just the changing of our society, you have more the winemaker saying, well, I'm going to make that call now.
Yes, That's true. Bob and I are we make the decision on everything in the vineyards, even though we're buying the fruit and there's a farmer. It's in the contract that we are the ones that determine the farming practices. And so that's why we go out to the sites, we assess, and we let them know what we want done. It might not be our crews that do it. Here on the estate, it is. We have total control and we do it ourselves.
Sure.
But for instance, in a vineyard up in St. Helena, we go and we look and we ask them to do the things that we want done, and then they will get those things done, including determining the date of harvest. That's the most important decision. It's very important.
King Harvest to surely come. That's the
Right.
great tune by the band.
Yeah.
Richard Manuel. Great. Yeah, I mean, before I let you go, and it's so great to hang with you, man. But can you talk about the effects of climate change on wine growing? What you see in your own gut? What does it tell you about the future?
Well, being here in Napa my whole life and being in the wine business since I was 16, I've seen a lot of harvests here. I've seen a lot of weather. I know what's normal. And what we've seen in the last 5 years is not normal.
What's not normal?
Well, things are earlier and
Right.
earlier and earlier. We just keep beating these record early harvest dates. And we're also seeing more heat spikes. We're seeing them more often and in more intensity each year, and that of course speeds things up. So,
Heat spikes when it's supposed to be hot, or when it actually gets.
when it's supposed to be hot, but
Yeah.
unusual spikes.
I mean, my folks just came from New York to visit me in Zona, and I mean, they just had a monster blizzard.
Right.
Something's going down.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not just one area. It's not just here. It's a whole.
So when things come early, how does that affect? Does that make the grapes ripen quicker? I mean, can you talk
it
about?
ripens quicker. It pushes the sugar and the nutrients to the berries very quickly, and that progression is pretty crucial for the balance of fruit to tannin to acidity, right? And so that completely affects the wine. And so what we like to see is this nice, even, slow, steady growth. And that comes from nice, even, steady weather, right? So when you get these big spikes and drops and spikes and drops, the vines get kind of confused. They start pushing things quickly to the fruit because they're in survival mode. And that can be, depending on the timing, if it's late in the process and the grapes are almost ripe, you really want that nice finish to be kind of just gradual. And when you get these big pushes of sugar like that, you can also get dehydration. And
that just means right.
Just
you suck
lost
all
tonnage, lost weight, which affects everybody. But also, then you've got concentrated sugar and flavors, which makes it difficult in the winemaking process because you don't want to get too high of an alcohol from those sugars. So it's all it all goes back to the vineyard, and it all is very tied into this climate, and we're trying to adapt. We're kind of anticipating like this year.
What's the proposition? No on what? What does that mean? No on C? No. What? I keep seeing big signs all over the county.
Yeah, there's a big measure it has to do with land use.
Okay, so it's not related to it's not a climate change issue.
No, it's how we develop land, like we were talking about earlier. There's certain clearing of oaklands that they want to do, and some are trying to preserve it, and others are trying to push it forward.
I get it.
And I am in a weird place because I grew up here and I'm a winemaker, so I need vineyards. I need more establishment, but I also am an environmentalist, and I know that we need to protect these things. So it's a hard place to be.
Just if you could encapsulate, what is the oral history? What is the history of Napa Valley? Is there any other place in the world that you've been to that really captures the essence of wine growing like Napa?
Well, it's so unique because we have so many different soil profiles. We have so many different little microclimates.
Which is just totally natural to this area.
To this area. I mean, the only other place that I've been to that reminds me of this, well, Italy reminds me, Tuscany reminds me of Napa and Sonoma. But
Same
wine-
soil foundation,
no,
or
a little bit different soils, depending on what part of the valley again. But I would say the land, the vegetation, the rolling hills, the olive trees, the cypress, the greenery, the vineyards. It's just very similar to this, only older buildings in older cities. So it has that same feel. But for wine making and wine growing, I think the closest thing. Other than that would be in Burgundy or even Bordeaux for wine growing.
Tress Goetting, you got a full day of work ahead of you. It's cold rain and snow here in Napa, but truly an honor to connect with you and the Biale Vineyards. It's a high honor to be chronicling this, and look forward to seeing your evolution and be back here as soon as possible.
My pleasure, man. Thanks, Jake. I love it.
We'll be back. See you later.